Well, we're just like last week. We'll start with a quick recap from last session. We had a good talk last week. I enjoyed it.
I just talked, and so
You
then I
did.
just don't know what happened.
But when you talk, good things come out. It's right. Yeah. So, anybody have any thoughts or questions, or just anything stick out to anyone from last week's conversation that was just let me mold over this week at all?
How old are your kids? 2. Okay. All right. So we're probably not talking villages with them and drawing diagrams with them yet.
No.
Probably not, right?
But it was like when we did the little circle of friendship, figuring out that only like 4 people go inside of that, and 2 of them are related to you is like eye-opening.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. So, like, we've had to talk with one of our kids about this. Is like, listen, you're not going to have 85 close friends. Like, I was 20.
Well, and I think we have to realize that also, this is a really good thing too, is when I was growing up, Facebook happened for when you were in college. You had to have the .edu,
Yeah, you
and
did.
that was the max social media that existed. And so the only people on social
It was
media
the Facebook.
were college age and higher, right? And so now there's this idea that it's like, if I don't have 1,000 friends on social media baseline, who am I even? And it's like, do you even really know 1,000 people at the age of 10? Like, how does that even work? Like, I might have that many people that I could probably tell you about because I've lived this many years and I've been in enough places to have picked that many people where I just like, oh yeah, I worked with this person and whatever. And so I think there's a baseline feeling that you should have 20 people in this circle and 20 people in this circle and 20 people in this circle. And I think it's legitimate to sometimes look at it and be like, I feel like maybe I've been a little antisocial, or maybe I haven't worked on my relationships as good as I need to, and I'm not looking for the right people and to pull people into those circles, further deeper in those circles, because it's a lot easier to leave them as acquaintances. It's a lot easier to leave them as fun friends. It's a lot easier to just like not actually have a serious conversation sometimes, because then they get to know you and they get to know the stuff that actually happens when you're home and all that sort of stuff, right? And
But on
so
the flip
I
side of
think,
that too, I think that I was in my 20s before I had probably my first really true close friend, like
fair.
BFF level, like that really I was 20, like besides my wife, like 24 when John,
we got married at 21 and 22, so I was really his first friend.
I mean, the first person who I had who was that kind of trust. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then I think there's probably been in my entire life 3 people who I could really say that really at that level of depth outside of Stephanie. And that's not for lack of trying. That's just for whatever reason, life situations or lack of trust, or people broke trust, or you know what I mean? Or I was just weird. I mean, let's be real.
Higher standards than the rest of
I mean, I don't feel like I did. I just feel like it just didn't happen. You know what I mean? Like that's okay. But I think, it's not a bad thing to look at your circles and go, oh, there aren't as many in that circle as I thought there were. But that's okay.
Yeah. So there's the balance, right, of looking and being like, do I need to work on this, or is this cooking right now? I hang out with middle schoolers a lot, so I'm using all my slang terms.
Let's go.
Slay queen. So, it's one of those things that it's like, it's a good thing to evaluate your circles, because those circles ideally are the ones that become your kids' circles. This is kind of what we talked about last week. And so it's a matter of building your own village to also then create their
and then
village.
teach them how to do it for themselves.
I mean, and for example, we are very picky about our village, particularly as it pertains to our children. If you're going to be alone with my kids for more than just about a car ride or two, like, there's a reason you're alone with my children, because I think that you are someone that I want them to call when they don't want to hear it from me at some point
And
in
that actually
life.
happened this week with
And
one of
this
our
week,
kids.
we got the voice messages is what they were. Which I hate voice messages. And she knows it. And she was like, I'm really sorry, but it's about your kids, so I know you're going to listen. And I was like, okay, cool. But it was like, she was driving her to ballet is what it was. And it was, here's what's going on. And
Here's
this
what
is
you
what she
talked
talked about. And this is, just wanted to let you know. And this is what I said. And hope that's okay. And it was like,
was
but
great.
yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, good. Because she is talking to us about it. But I'm glad that she is reaching out appropriately to the village that I've built for her. And so it's fun to see those things play out as well, when they start to also kind of make friends with your friends, and like Abby texted one of my friends the other day and was like, oh, it's her birthday. And I was like, it is. And so she like texts her, you know what I mean? And so it's like, it's good to then evaluate your circles and make sure that you're being intentional with your circles, making sure they overlap with your kids as much as you want them to. Because that does take work, and it takes people who want to overlap with your children as well, because not everybody does.
Especially your kids are little, you'll find that maybe your friends aren't as comfortable with the idea of a kid around.
Oh, we love it. And like, he has nicknames for all of them.
Great.
Even better.
Yeah.
I think we're pretty much like, I was always told not to be in this situation, but I think we're like the best example of all of our friends.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I think we just grew up a little faster than them.
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing. I mean, in some ways, not for maturity's sake, but like in a lot of ways, like we're done having kids, but a lot of our friends,
Just
a lot of
started.
our are having like their first and second kids right now. I'm like, oh, okay,
All right. Yeah.
not a bad thing. It's just like, oh, and then there we are.
So,
So, anybody else?
cool.
The mentor thing, I was thinking about like when I like started to write down mentors and like, you know, like my dad is like a mentor, you know, but like the other people that I would look up to or like would want to spend more time with or learn stuff from, I don't talk to them as much as like I might like, you know, but they're like, for the one I'm thinking about has like 4 kids and like each one of them plays a sport and like both parents work and like, so, and they live like 30 minutes away, so it's just, it's like we barely see them.
You want to know what the trick is to hanging out with people who have 2 careers and 4 kids? Just say, hey, we want to hang out. Hey, is there a time we can get brunch? Like, what works for you? Or, like,
It might be 4 weeks away.
it might, legitimately. Now, if it needs to not be 4 weeks away, just tell me. Because let me put the kids to bed and you can come over at 9. Like, you know what I mean? And so make sure you have those people, but don't feel bad for reaching out, because if they're people you really have a relationship with, they're really fine with it. It's just they also have 4 kids, and sometimes that's all
schedule.
you see. And we also try to like lift our heads up sometimes, and it's like we have to be really intentional
try.
to be like, okay, but you know, when they're all thrown up, what are you gonna do, right? But I mean, it is one of those things that's like, if you want that, reach out for it. They're not gonna.
They won't say no.
The good ones are not gonna say no.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When does your kid have a game? I'll come sit with you. Because there are times that I've literally like, there was someone, it was going through stuff, and I was like, actually, you live down on Brookside, and Ruthie's in ballet, and actually she has Nutcracker rehearsals on Saturdays from 1 to 2:30. So I literally sit in the car. Do you want to just like hang out in my car? Like, you bring coffee and we'll hang out in my car. And that's what we did every Saturday for like 2 months. And like, you just never know how you're going to find that hole. But if it's like, hey, I really like, I just want to learn, like, you never know. It's worth a shot.
Yeah. So, good thoughts. And finding those people who bring specific wisdom like that. I think, so there are people who look at us and say, you know what? You're the person I call for blah, blah, blah. And it's not weird for them to say that to us. That's okay. Like, when we need help with, you know, financial advice or tech, you know, or parent or whatever it is.
They don't call me for tech advice.
No, they don't. You say, call Michael.
Yeah. Like, why are you even talking to me? I don't care. Just call my husband, please.
But, cool. Well, let's jump in. So tonight we're going to talk about relationship, faith, and discipline. Yay, fun. Light topics. No big deal. But here's the thing. The foundational thing for talking about conversations of faith with your kids, or even discipline, is relationship and defining the nature of your relationship with your kids. And I think there's a lot of different interpretations of how this works. So I think what would be good for us to do is let's talk about defining relationship. Let's start with there. Just kind of toss out what does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it relate like to be in relationship with somebody? Might seem like a duh answer, but just toss it out.
I said awesome, like coming home with my friend, like every time, like every night. I don't know, just like always having somebody.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Don't have to go home alone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Being in a relationship with somebody. What does that look like?
Anybody? There's different forms of relationships.
Okay. Toss it out there. What are some universal things that are common to all the different kinds of relationships?
Communication.
What's that?
Communication.
Communication. Yeah.
Communication.
Respect.
Respect. Yeah.
Respect.
Patience.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that one, so.
Proximity. You got to
Proximity.
be around the person, right?
Yeah.
So that relationship with your kids is going to look different for every kid at every stage. That's just the nature of it. And so there's some things that, like, are you modeling relationship with your kids, to your kids, not just with somebody else, but to them, right? Are you being intentional to have conversations, to increase with your vulnerability as they grow in age? Your kids are going to change with every age, right? And so your relationship should change with them as well. Your relationship's not going to look the same with your 6-month-old as it is with your 5-year-old. And then when your 6-month-old is 5, it's just not going to look the same. And so is your relationship adapting and changing and morphing with time? It should, right? And that's not always a bad thing. In fact, usually that's a good thing. Even if there are seasons where, like, I'm walking through a season with one of my kids that we were really, really, really close, and then went through a season where their life changed a lot, and now we're not as close. But all of a sudden, it's like, she gets my jokes again, and we can have conversations, and we're connecting over music and fun. Like, oh, we can hang out. Oh, this is nice.
But you also can't make the higher level jokes at me without her picking up on them either. So.
That's true. That's very true. And you know, I for a moment I got like, oh my gosh, have I lost my connection with this kid? And all of a sudden it's like, no, it's there, it's back. And part of it was on me because I was still trying to relate with this kid as a 5-year-old. And that's not how.
As your little baby girl.
Oh my gosh. That's not how it works anymore. It's not. She doesn't think that way anymore. She's not going to receive affection or correction or input in the same way she did when she was 5, right? And so it took me a hot minute to realize that, oh, my relationship with you is going to change. Just like, honestly, my relationship with you has changed over seasons. And it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing. And I think at the core of that difficulty in those changes is realizing that we're on this journey of letting go of our kids. All right, that we talked about last week is stewardship. We're on this journey of, we start off really, really, really hands-on, and the older they get, we're relinquishing control and relinquishing protection and allowing them to determine their own course as they get older. And that's hard. That's difficult, especially when they make choices like, I wouldn't prefer that choice.
Don't like that.
Don't, and again, not the deal breaker choices, right? But as they get older, it's like, well, we're going to give you a longer leash here. And, oh, you made it. I didn't prefer that, but it worked out okay for you. But I didn't prefer that. That's hard as a parent to know the difference between is this within my purview to control and protect or not? And as they get older, that umbrella gets smaller and smaller and smaller. You know, and my dad is great at this now. I was the oldest. My parents weren't amazing at this whole letting go thing at first. And we laugh about it now. But my dad would be telling you about something. He's like, well, do you want my advice or want me to say good job? Like with this look, I was like, Dad, just say good job. Good job.
It hurts his heart. But he just, yeah.
He's like, oh, good job.
Okay, all right.
Like it worked out. I said, I know it worked out, but oh, right. Yeah. Do you want me to be your cheerleader or give you my input? And as they get older, learning when to ask that question, that's a tough one, especially as they hit that like 10 plus and then 15 plus. Whew. And they're, and this is a long and slow process, beginning with their first steps and ending when they move out on their own. And so I think it would be great for us to talk about what do some of these relationship stages look like based on age. I
mean, so obviously, like when they're babies,
they need you for everything.
Right? And it's when they're crying, you're there with them. And when they're sad, you're there with them. And when they're happy, you're there with them. And you are their life. And you are what they trust in. And you are giving up your entire whole being, it feels like. I think particularly if you have physically given birth to this thing, because your body's also like doing all these things you don't understand the first time around, where your entire life is wrapped up in this kid. And as they grow and they begin to say, actually, I want to go to dad instead of just sit in your lap. Yeah, the first time you're kind of like, oh God, that's okay. All right, good. Like I'm going to go take a nap. See y'all later. But then as it happens more, you can't say it doesn't sting a little bit every once in a while. When they pick an aunt over you or they pick someone else over you, they want to go hang out with
Or they pick being by themselves over you. Oh.
Yeah, just come get in my lap.
No.
And then it's like,
Oh.
don't like that, right? And so that's the constant, I think, burden to bear as a parent, is that sting and recognizing that it means you're doing it right because you feel attached, but you've raised someone who feels confident enough to move forward in the next stage. And that stings it means you're doing it right because it hurts, right? Because it's that letting go and it hurts a little bit. But you're proud, but you're so excited because you're taking steps, you're making friends, you're doing the thing, but okay, right? And that feeling keeps going. I haven't found the end of it yet.
Nope.
And I don't think you ever do. But so like when they're babies, you kind of have that full control aspect in a way. They become toddlers and, you kind of get used to the like, oh, they want grandma or they want, whatever, and you kind of move in that direction. As they become toddlers and they get those feeling words, are you happy? Are you sad? Those sorts of things is where you can begin to connect that relationship of, hey, I noticed you were sad, so I brought your favorite toy over here. Do you want to talk? Because then that begins to show them, oh, well, when mommy's sitting over in the corner and looks like this, mommy, are you sad? I brought my favorite toy for you, right? You're teaching that it goes both ways. Sometimes it's okay for you to say, when they look at you and they're like, mommy's really sad right now. And so I just need a moment. But connecting those emotions to what's happening, because they're going to understand happy, sad, scared. Start with the ones they understand. Don't say, mommy's feeling nostalgic. Can I get that? Are you sick? Like, what is happening, right? So it's like, it's using the correct words that they're going to understand in the moment. And then even as they're toddlers, it's beginning to show interest in what they're interested in, even if it just fries your brain a little bit. So much brain frying sometimes. And like, some people are really, really good at it, and some people really, really have to work hard. And I really, really have to work hard in those, like, getting in the floor and just like, so we're building a house. This is Spider-Man. Ooh, we're on Spider-Man again. I know Spider-Man and I know Octopus Man. I don't even know. Like, Doc Ock. There we go. Like, I know Tobey Maguire, and that's about as far as I get. Like, you know what I mean? And we're down into all these universes and things. But, like, okay, sit and read me your comic book. And I'm going to be excited with you and for you. But I'm also going to invite you to be excited about this new record that I got. And we're going to dance around the house to it because I'm excited. And I'm going to invite you to be excited with me in this relationship.
And by new record, you mean Leonard Skinner. That's what you mean.
Samuel likes it. So I've got one. But it's one of those things where you have to build the reciprocal nature of it, right? Because if you only build one side and you're always catering to your kid, then that's where you get the kid who never looks up and says, oh, you're not okay. Oh, are you sad? Are you angry? Are you, like, that second part of a relationship, right? That reciprocal part. So we don't create one-way friends, like we talked about last week. And then it's also not just making everything about you either, right? It's being interested in them and what they're doing, not just always being like, well, I'm the parent, so you're going to listen to my music. Never Coco Melon ever. You know what I mean? Like, right?
Well, and really, I mean, I think I read this a few weeks ago, there are really 3 big stages of what your roles as parent are. And that, like, 0 to, like, really about 5th grade, your protection. That's what you're providing. You're providing protection. Mm-hmm. From about 5th grade on to about middle of high school, you're providing empowerment. And then from there beyond, you walk into peer land, which is weird. And we haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, not yet.
We've gotten there with our parents.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget the first time your dad called me to talk and process about something. I'm like, what? I mean, this is great, but whoa.
Yeah.
Right? Or my dad called me, was like, okay, you want to just talk about life and you're having a hard time? Okay, let's do this.
And it gets there.
Let's do this. And so knowing kind of as those shifts are happening takes finesse and it takes listening and it takes a lot of active listening, right?
And sometimes it does take someone looking at you and saying, they're not a little kid anymore.
Oh, I had that happen once. Ooh. That was fun.
Love you.
Yeah.
So when you start hitting those elementary years, really starting to talk about who did you hang out with at school today, talking about their friends, being, right, like being the parent that the kids know, right? Doesn't mean you have to be always with kids in your house, doesn't mean, but like, are you around enough and do you interact with the other kids that are there so that you also have a relationship with them? My philosophy is always like, well, if any of them have a medical question, please at least come talk to me. Like, at least you'll kind of know what little box I fit into. And if my relationship with my kid is one that we get along well and my kid loves us and feels like she has a safe home, then maybe if one of her friends doesn't, or she's in a fight with one of her parents or something, maybe we can also be that village for them, even if they don't realize it. As another way of in the world. This is another way of just being Jesus in the world that we exist in, is by being Jesus to the other kids that our kids are around.
And the kids' parents.
Yeah, like we talked about.
Today I made a mistake with well, I didn't realize it was a mistake. I was in the kitchen, and I'm sitting in the living room, and I'm just watching him do stuff. He's getting some noodles or something. And I said, "You are so cute."
Oh, cute.
And he said, "Are you looking at baby pictures or something?" I said, "No, you." I said, "You're so adorable." He said, "Oh."
Yeah.
I was expecting a thanks.
Yeah, like, thanks, Mom. Appreciate that.
But
Oh.
he was adorable. Like,
Yeah.
He's a cutie.
Yeah.
He didn't like me calling him a cutie.
Yeah, well, and what I've noticed is, like, because our kids are, like, back to back like that, right, is that being called mommy didn't last as long the second time and the third time. And by the
No.
fourth time, I've pretty much been mom, like, most of the time. Like, mommy kind of died away. You know what I mean? And, like, so now it's like, I could get away with calling Abby cute for a long time. By the time Samuel was, I think, 4, was when he said, "I'm not cute." It's like, okay, like, we're already there. You know what I mean?
Wow.
It's just, and so it's like, also those peer interactions, and if you have more siblings in the mix and you've got older siblings in the mix, your younger ones are going to grow up faster. I hate to throw that one at you,
They absolutely will.
but it 100% happens even if you try not to let it happen. And so, middle school, try to stay up on the slang. Maybe
Try.
not too crazy,
Try.
but try with what you got. Maybe one of you can, you know what I mean? But like, just try to hit some high points, just
And if
so that
nothing
you
else, you
kind
make
of
fun of
know.
yourself for not knowing, and that
Yeah.
makes you, incredible.
It's
to
kind
them.
of like if you go to another language, another country, and you try to speak the language, even if you do it bad, they're like, "Oh, that's sweet, you tried," right? They'll see you trying. They're going to make fun of you, but be okay with that. Can you shoulder that to maintain the relationship? Can you shoulder being made fun of a little bit to keep that relationship intact?
Because that also, that's actually the funny thing is, it seems very small, but the ability to kind of laugh at yourself and laugh at your own mistakes teaches them to take themselves a little lighter than usual too. Because at that age, especially, they're taking themselves so seriously. Everything. I tied my shoes the wrong way. I'm like, really? It's a shoelace. Like, come on.
Either they're taking themselves way too seriously or they're really not. So, like,
Right.
personalities. But are you still talking? I thought you were talking.
No, I
I
was
was
gonna
just
say,
going
so-
to go get a drink.
No, and that's, I mean, a lot of times what we're seeing is that's where they are going to start learning to make their own decisions, and where you do shift into that empowerment place, where you're not making a decision for them, you're asking them, what do you think about this? What do you think the right thing to do here is? What do you think the right decision is? And letting them kind of make that call, giving them appropriate, and of course if they go off the charts, like, well, maybe we're not going to do that, but let's talk about why not, rather than just like, no, shut it down, because I said so. I have a hard time not defaulting to that one with our older ones, especially when I have to lean into more like, no, here's why not, and that's a hard thing for me to do, rather than just like, nope,
And here's the thing is, if you've trained them when they're young, my dad always said, if I yell duck, I don't need you to ask, why? What for? But what's happening, Dad? Do I really have to? It's going to, like, I don't need 15 reasons. I need you to hit the floor and ask questions later. And still to this day, if my dad yells duck or something, like, and I'll never
Yep.
forget, like, I was a youth leader. I was in college. I don't know if you know the story. I was in college, and I had talked him into coming because in order for a lot of the, okay, I was a youth leader, so we have like all these college kids who are like, we're going to go to a cabin in the woods and take all your youth kids and it's going to be so fun. And so then they were like, maybe you should bring like a real adult. And so I was like, Dad, you were a youth pastor for a while. You want to come? He's like, sure, whatever. Like, okay, cool. I'll be the adult. So Dad comes, there's like four-wheelers, and I get on this four-wheeler, and we're like, it was super fun. We like did the thing, came off the hill a little bit, landed, so good, nothing bad happened. We circle back around, and my dad goes, and I was like, it's fine. I was like, in my brain, I'm 20 years old, like, sir. And he just goes, and I was like, oh, okay. And I just got off because it's like, it's one of those things that it's like, what an example to youth kids, honestly, like for me to be able to like be called down in a way, but also like safety issues, like you don't get to argue with me. Like that's just, we don't get to argue. You're putting your seatbelt on. You have to eat your vegetables. I will talk to you about which ones you like and which ones you don't like, but if you only give me one that you like, you're gonna eat some other ones. Like it's just how it's gonna go, right? Health and safety ultimately are my calls right now.
Dr.
Right?
Mom. Yep.
Like, this is how this is going to go. But I'll work with you as much as I can. Okay, you want to go on a four-wheeler? Let's do this when maybe it's not a 14-year-old driving you on a four-wheeler getting air. Maybe I'll take you on a four-wheeler, right? Like, let's do this later, not here. And so being able to have that when they're younger, but then you have to be able to back off from that as they age. You have to have that self-control. And especially if you have more than one, you have to be able to be trying to parent this one this way and parent this one a little bit differently at the same time.
And I think one thing that's important to think about too as we look at these different stages here is, and we're going to do a little exercise here in a second of kind of looking to the end. And I don't like to idealize very often, but I do think it's important for us to say, what would we like, not a goal, but a desire, right? The difference, goals are things you can accomplish, desires are things you can't accomplish, right? What would we desire that our adult child would look back and say to us as they're leaving our house? Like, what would we want them to say as they're moving out, right? And I think it's okay for us to kind of think through, and important for us to think through, what do we want them to walk away with as a feeling or a sentiment? So let's take a couple minutes to do that. There's a little spot in your paper, and we don't, again, if you want to share it, you can. If not, you don't have to. We'll take a few minutes, and just follow that prompt. Think through the stages. Again, a lot of you have kids that are very small. I know, Alicia, you have a kid, your kids are older. So you're probably closer to, and maybe you have experienced that once of like your adult kid looking back and they're out of your house. But yeah, go for it. And if you want to do, one for each kid, great. If you have multiple kids, if not, it's up to you. All right, so let's go ahead and jump back in. Anybody want to share? No pressure.
Actually, I would like for my kids to say, thanks, Mom, and also, Mom, you were right. That's what I like.
Those are two sentiments that are not very often heard from children. Right. Thank you, and you were right.
Not until later,
Not
I
until
think.
later, yeah. There have been a couple glimmers in our 13-year-old was like, Daddy, you were right about that. I'm like, my first instinct is to be like, say that again, please, louder for the audience.
Yeah. Well, but I think even it was after we had kids that it would be like, oh, thanks, Mom. Because you understand it to a certain point of like, oh, you did what I'm doing now, and this is kind of hard. I now understand. And then you kind of get that gratefulness for what was before that you don't always understand.
Anybody else?
I would want Silas, he's my oldest, he's 5. I would want him to say, like, thanks for growing up alongside me. Because I'm still growing up too. And he's the first one, so he gets to grow up with me. And so I feel like he gets the brunt end of everything.
100%.
Yep. We've had to look at our oldest and be like, yeah, we didn't do that right with you, sorry. She was like, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, we told her.
Gee, thanks.
She knows.
Yeah.
Like, we kind of knew what we were doing. Not really. We were guessing. We're still guessing, but like,
we're
always
in our
guessing with
now.
you because I've never done 13, 14, 15. Like, I've never done that until I had you.
I always joke around with my oldest one and tell him that he was the practice kid.
Yeah.
In some ways, yeah.
That's kind of how it is.
Anybody else? I would say one thing that's also, as an other side of this, that you should do as you go on, is think about what you'd want to say to them. 'Cause I'll say, as the adult kid, right, who's come out of it, we've all been there, I think something that is common is there are things that all of us wish we would have heard from our parents, right? And so think through the other flip side of this conversation of what do you think your older or your kids would want to hear from you as they go out on their own, and make sure you reinforce those things as they age, as they get older. So there's a whole tangent we can go into about Enneagram, about childhood messages, but I think sometimes as parents we forget that they need to hear those things from us as much as we need to hear it from them. So just something to think through. So we're going to take a little bit of a gear shift here and talk about authority and discipline. Yeah, light topics, right?
Super easy.
Super easy. And I'll preface this by saying this is one of those things we say this every week. We have not cornered the market on this. We have not figured this out 100%. Right? We are still very much learning and growing.
We're swimming in the waters too, friends.
Right. And so a lot of this is stuff that we've learned from other people, from mentors, other parents, people in ministry, or just from experience. Like, well, that didn't work. And the asterisk here is that because every child's personality is different, how you relate authority to them is going to be different, each one. One of our children, I can look at and say, and they'll be like welling up in tears just as I give them like a sideways look. One of them, I'll say, and they'll be like, oh, really? Right? And they like argue, even though it's like, the sky is blue. Really? Are you sure about that? Like, water is wet. Are you sure? Like that, really?
I don't know. And they'll go ask 5 other people, like, cool.
Right.
And then you have one that it's like, oh yeah, sure. I won't do that. And then they wait until you're not looking. And then they do it.
Right.
The fourth one just does it in your face. So I don't know. But like,
but, and so I think there's lots of levels to this. There's, lots of questions that we could ask about this. But the first one is like, are we supposed to be friends to our children? Whew, that's a hard one, right? That's a real hard one, especially at the different phases thing, right? And I would say the hard answer is no. No.
not yet.
Not yet. We're not at peer level with our children yet. Not to that adult stage, right? And so this is and again, each of us are pendulum swings from, if we had super, super authoritarian, harsh parents, our gut instinct is going to be to swing real hard the other direction and be really soft and gentle and peer. And the difficult thing is that friendship is something that comes over time as they age and mature, not as children to parent. And it's a hard, prickly thing to say, but one of the more difficult things about parenting is teaching that love is not about the warm, fuzzy feelings, right? But love, true love, is about choosing to do what is right towards the other person, not just what feels good towards the other person. And that's hard because sometimes showing true love means you're going to be angry at me right now because I made a decision that you're not going to like because you made a mistake, right? I have to give you a consequence, or I have to take something away, or I
have to let the consequence happen to you. I can't just jump in and fix it.
Right. But it's important to remember that discipline is never, ever about bringing shame or guilt in the sense of identity-based guilt, right? Don't ever make them sorry for who they are as a means of discipline. Discipline is about bringing correction. Correction is teaching. It's not, and this is the hard thing, especially when you're in the moment, it's not about preventing bad behavior. That's really not what it is. You're not trying to keep them from acting out when they go to the mall, right? That's not why we correct. It's not it's not about outcomes in the sense of behavior. Sorry, Umbi told me a story. Sorry, that wasn't about you, Umbi. Promise. They were at the mall, and he told me a story about it, yeah. Big tantrum at the mall, yeah. It's not about that. That's not what correction's about.
Okay, but one thing I'm going to say is the part back on is the difference in, right, so guilt, feeling bad for something you've done, shame, feeling bad for who you are.
Correct.
Okay, so part of that is making sure, Bible says, life and death is in the power of the tongue. And it gets real, real important that you realize that when you're a parent, because you're dealing with a blank slate. who takes your word
And
as
you're writing
truth.
in permanent marker.
So
on
the
that blank
moment
slate.
you look at them and say, you're so selfish, you have just spoken identity to them. Instead of, all right,
That
my
was a
friend,
selfish decision.
that was
you
really
just made.
selfish.
Yeah.
Do you want to be selfish? Is this who you want to be? Because I know that you're a very giving person. I know you're very kind. I know you want to do what's right. I know how nice you are when this happens and this happens, whatever you want to say. But so how do we fix this? You just took this, that was your brother's.
And then
How
you
do we
broke
fix
it.
that?
Yeah.
Because we don't want to be selfish people, right? No. Okay. So let's realize that this was an action. Let's ask for forgiveness. Let's say we're sorry. And then let's fix it and move on.
And we'll cover this in a little bit, but what you just described there is keeping behavior separate from identity. And that's hard for humans to do, right? Separate the person from the behavior. Always. Because what they do is not who they are, right? It's a choice they make.
Now, I am not talking about mean, horrible people who have hurt you over and repeated in the past. I do think there are some people that you just have to be like, whatever, okay? But this is your 4-year-old. This is your 5-year-old. They are not this. They are who you kind of shape them to be at this point, right? So,
And it's not just about preventing bad behavior, but it's creating healthy habits, helping them understand and empowering them to make good choices for themselves. Because it's not just about like, don't do that. It's, hey, when you do this, that good thing happens, right? When you do this, this is the kind of decision that Jesus would want us to make, right? And we'll talk about faith in a little bit, but it's not just about, hey, when you do this, you're going to get spanked, or when you do this bad thing's going to happen. But it's teaching them that positive choices create positive environments and positive situations. And this is why we punish bad behavior. It's not just to prevent that behavior, but to change their mindset that caused that behavior in the first place, right? And so, honestly, punishment, what we've had to learn through our experimenting, is that punishment is not usually the first thing you should go to, especially when they're little. Like,
I think most of us know when they're little tiny, it's redirect, right? Oh, I want to touch the light socket.
And we're not talking
Let's
about
go
like
play with the puppy dog.
What we're not doing is we're not trying to
Right.
we're not trying to create like, oh, just be soft, gentle parents like that. I'm not trying to fall into a certain model.
Just come
here.
hang out with us for one day.
Yeah, not at all. But understand, especially when they're little, most of the time when they're acting out or making a bad choice, they're just trying to solve a problem in the only way their mind knows how to, right? They're trying to cope or solve a problem that they see as a problem, and in their mind, well, point A to point B is the best way to get there, right? I want that toy, I'm just going to take it, right? And so a lot of times they don't have the skills to think through the right process of making that choice
Right.
yet until you teach it to them. They're not born with the innate knowledge to be not selfish, right? They're not born with the innate knowledge to always tell the truth. That's just not the case, right? The whole idea of the sin nature, right? We're born into sin. That's the fallen world we live in. And so it's our job to help them learn the nature of Christ, which is making good decisions, right? And that takes repeating and process and painstaking, long-suffering patience.
So we talked about this last night because a lot of it is okay, what do we do? Like, how are we gonna, like, what do we actually do? Because I was like, we don't really have like a protocol. There's not an algorithm. Right?
Everyone's different.
But, as they kind of grow a little bit and you have to be consistent. If you say, if you do this, this is going to happen, then it better dang well happen. Because otherwise, they're gonna know they might get away with it half the time. Or 75%
You
of
got
the
to
time.
be consistent, and that's hard.
The consistency is hard.
Especially you don't want to hurt their feelings. You just don't.
But also don't make threats when you're mad and say, if this happens, then this is going to happen. And then you're like,
Well,
and I
never
just said that
mind.
we're actually not going to go to grandma's. And actually, we really need to go to grandma's. So cool, right? So you got to be able to keep your mouth shut when you're mad and actually think through what are the consequences going to be that I'm going to take your iPad away.
What can we actually follow through with here?
I'm going to take your iPad away. Babe, we're going on a 12-hour road trip. Could we maybe have thought of a different one?
They use the iPad for school.
Ugh, yeah. Right, so it's definitely those things where it's like making sure we are looking at it appropriately, not being hasty, right? You can always sit a kid in a chair and say, hold on a minute. Always.
That actually, sometimes, depending on the kid, works better to be like, you know what, I got to think about your consequence now.
Because I don't even know what to do.
Yeah. I need to go think about what we're
sit
going to
here.
happen now. Like, that's,
Right? So,
But whenever when you find yourself in that moment, take a step back, evaluate what's actually going on, right? Especially if you see repeated behaviors. Because a lot of times when you see repeated behaviors of the same thing, something's not okay. And I'm not saying you switch gears into like, oh, let's just excuse that. No, we're not talking about making excuses. We're talking about find the core. Because a lot of times those like lashing out are secondary things. They're not primary feelings. They're secondary, right? They're symptoms, not the cause. And so, yeah, you can treat the symptom, sure, but find out what's at the root of why are you really not okay? And like this happened this morning. Because wouldn't you know it, the day I'm supposed to teach about these things, I get a life lesson in it. And I have a kid who just, over the course of 30 minutes, makes every wrong choice possible, right? Literally, going to school, you made every choice you had, you made the wrong one. And so there's about a 15 or 20 minute gap between drop-offs. And so I turn around and I'm like, okay, we walked through this happened. What gives? This is not like you. What's going on? And all of a sudden just tears and the real cause comes out. And I could have jumped to like, okay, fine, this consequence, and you're in trouble and you're grounded. We could have gone there. But I would have missed the chance to actually figure out what's really going on with that kid. Of like, you're not okay. And yeah, we can deal with and we dealt with the consequences of like, hey, you made these bad choices and listen, now we have consequences, but we're going to table that and we're going to help get you okay first. And then we'll come back to that. And like, she knows we had to come back to the consequences. But what was more important in that moment was like, I had to figure out what was really going on.
yeah.
And
And it's grace and mercy. If we are truly grace and mercy driven, there is going to be, as they age, you can have those conversations and they understand the separation of, you're still going to have consequences. I love you more than you understand. And they'll get that and they'll accept those consequences. They don't like them.
And sometimes they're natural consequences.
Yeah. I mean,
you
they're
stayed
gonna
up late,
understand.
but guess what? School still starts tomorrow morning and you got to be downstairs at 7 o'clock. And guess what? You're not awake at 6:15 like you're supposed to be. I'm going to come get you out of bed. I don't care how tired you are. That's a natural consequence. You didn't
And
go
we
to bed when I
expect
asked
you to do all of your things and to have a good attitude.
Yep. And that's
And
real.
that is your consequence.
That's a
Let's
natural
go.
consequence. And the hard thing is like, some parents will be like, well, you know what? We had a great talk and we're just going to let that natural consequence not happen. But you've got to let the consequence happen. Otherwise, they won't feel the sting and they'll come back to it and do it again because they think they can get away with it. That's just human nature. And sometimes that natural consequence is the punishment. You've already punished yourself. I don't have to think of another one. You're going to be exhausted in the morning, so there's your consequence. And here's the thing. This is designed to help them draw a line, right? This process of step back, evaluate before you just jump to punishment. Because your goal should be to help them draw a line from their actions to the results, right? Not their identity, but their choices to their results. So, for example, in our home, we don't accept blaming others for our bad choices or our bad outcomes. If it's, but so-and-so, I don't care what so-and-so did.
You
Right.
still have a choice.
Now, sometimes it's like legit, well, you really couldn't help that. But I'm not going to accept.
I will listen to the whole story,
Right. And we should listen to the whole story.
but most of the time, someone didn't force you into that choice.
Right. And so teaching them to draw a line, well, you know what? When you do that, this is what happens. And even using examples from your own life, that whole appropriate vulnerability. What you'll find as you get older is your children will probably struggle with the same things you did. Right? That's a fun one to deal with. Like, oh, you had the same struggle I did at 10 years old. Oh, only it's more intense. Okay. So here's the consequence I had to learn when I made that same decision. And here's what I had to walk through, and here's why I don't do that anymore. Because I got tired of having to deal with this, and this.
The other thing I'll say is if you don't explain what the expectations are, you can't get mad.
Yep.
So sometimes as they age, you'll find that they do something and you're like, oh, we've never done this before and it's the wrong decision. So the first thing is just being like, all right, we don't put metal in the microwave. Do you see what this did? Okay, we're not going to do that anymore. Deal?
Yes, that is very specific. Uh-huh.
Deal? Okay, we're not going to plug up the bathroom sink and then run water.
With toilet paper, because it's fun.
We're not going to
Also
do
real
that.
specific.
Okay? Right? Like, so, okay, fine, we've done this new thing. Like, yes, obviously, like, since you were this big, I say you markers go on paper. So you already know what the expectations are, right? When you stumble upon those new things as they age, can't get mad if they don't know. So the first conversation is, let me teach you. So understand this is now the expectation.
Yeah.
So then you can follow the protocol of, you know, sometimes it's like, it was an accident. I mean, fine. But if we're noticing a trend, all right, it's time to sit down.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a chat, and we're going to see, A, what's going on in life, and then B, okay, what do we need to do also, because we're not going to tolerate this behavior.
And especially some with little ones, a lot of you have little ones in the room. They don't have the tools to know how to express themselves yet. So I put this little handy little chart on your paper, this color wheel. It's funny, the youth theater, my kids do music theater. They have one on the walls like musical characters, like the Wicked Witch of the West is in the red one, right? She's just angry all the time. But help your kids by understanding what they're feeling. Because if they're lashing out of a feeling, again, sometimes lashing out is a secondary thing. Most of the time it's a secondary thing.
Anger is what's considered actually a secondary emotion.
Right.
So anger is a secondary emotion, period. If someone is angry, there's something underneath that. Either we are scared, we're sad, we were hurt, and so that's why we're sad. You know what I mean? Like, we're trying to protect something because we've been hurt before. Like, anger is a secondary. So if you see anger somewhere, you got to dig deeper, right? And so if you see a kid who is normally X, Y, and Z, and then they're this, you got to dig, because that's like, okay, that's kind of one of those red flags of like, that's not your normal. It's like when your kid starts to like, oh, they came home and laid down on the couch and went to sleep. They're going to get sick. Like, you just know that that's just not going to be good, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing emotionally. You see something off, doesn't always mean it's bad. Sometimes they just have off days, and that's fine. But can you say, hey, are you okay? Yeah, I'm just kind of feeling tired. All right, did anything happen at school? No. And then that's it, and then they're fine the next day. Cool.
And so again, give them tools for coping. So rather than throwing a fit, rather than screaming, you can come tell me, I'm upset right now. I don't like this, right? There's a really funny Bluey episode. If you haven't watched Bluey with your kids, Bluey's hilarious.
Oh, Bluey's phenomenal.
The one where she's in the wagon and he said, no, you can come put your hand on my arm if you want to tell me something, rather than just like, you know, barking out at me. And again, to kind of wrap this part of the conversation up, always avoid creating shame about identity when you're correcting. Even if that's what was modeled for you, and we'll get to that next.
You can still speak life.
You should still speak life. And again, you do that by separating the behavior from the person, right? So
we mentioned earlier, we all parent out of a response to how we were parented.
sometimes it's good or bad.
Yeah.
Let's just be real. Sometimes our home experiences were not positive.
Yeah.
And that's okay to acknowledge.
And for some of it was good. My dad's around church. If you see me in this, I won't say older guy, but probably dad if you watch this.
In the 60s,
You
he's
know,
fine.
we'll walk around and he like picks my kids up and whatever. Like, okay, that's my dad. And he is kind of like a prime example, and he would be okay with me sharing this.
Yes, he would.
He would be a prime example of basically kind of a reactionary parenting. So his dad was abusive.
Alcoholic abuse. Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
Anyway, he was abusive.
fine.
Point
Bad-
is, he
bad
was
stuff.
abusive. And when he tells the stories of like when he would walk in the room, I would just try to find a different door out. Just wherever dad is, don't be there. Try not to breathe. If you have to be there, just keep your head down. Wait till you can get out. Okay. So fast forward, my mom and dad get married. Mom says, I don't have kids. And he says, oh, see, about that, I don't know how to do that well because my example was terrible and I'm not going to know what to do. And she was like, well, if you'll let me, I will teach you. I had good examples, and he knew her parents. And he said, well, okay, that's fine. My dad did swing very passive in his parenting. as a result of what had happened to him, right? So it could be very easy for me in some ways to look back and be like, well, you should have. Why didn't you? You could have said this, done this. Like, why didn't you? Why didn't you? Why didn't you? But what a curse to be broken. That he was able to give me a safe home to grow up in. A home where I knew that my voice mattered. And no matter what I said, he was never going to raise a hand at me. Right? So I think it's also important for us to sometimes take a step back, and if we're very critical of what was before, to say, but we sometimes don't know what happened before and why they are the way that they are. To give grace, to forgive, so that we're not carrying on the vows and the judgments that maybe we made in our childhood.
I will never be like that. I'm never
going to do that. I'll always do this, blah, 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 blah. We all got to do our own work to take a step back and say, okay, it's okay to evaluate and say, you know what, this didn't really work. This didn't really work. But are we doing it objectively, or are we doing it all out of emotion and reaction? Because that will either give you a hard swing, or you will become exactly what you swear you won't become.
And that's ultimately what making vows and judgments will do, is make you the thing you swore you would never do, right? If you get so set in something and so entrenched in one way of thinking, eventually that'll create conflict, because that thing will eventually not become applicable anymore. And so to hold on to something so tightly from one season to the next, when really that thing is required to change, will just create conflict and tension. Disappointment, unmet expectations.
Also, another thing that I will say is we talk about being appropriately vulnerable with your kids, especially here in a little bit. And to my dad's credit, he would come to me and say, I'm sorry, I'm not more involved. I know that I'm passive, but I don't always know what to do. And this is why. And so to be able to, like, as I became like a teenager, I remember hearing that and being like, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. So suddenly there was grace from me, and I wasn't making vows and judgments against him because I understood it. And so to have that understanding and to have appropriate vulnerability from a parent, to be able to trust me with that hard information, right, builds that relationship stronger as well, because then I'm able to come in and be like, hey, here's my things that I'm struggling with. And he's saying, here's my things I'm struggling, and it's okay. We're human, and we're all doing our best, you know?
And so we'll take just a couple minutes here. I think it's okay and necessary to evaluate sometimes. Are there things that you have sworn up and down that you wouldn't change, that you've had to change? Or are there things that you might feel like are non-negotiable that really aren't essential and should be evaluated? And these are deep dive questions. And we're probably not going to do this all right now, but I left space on your papers because this is a deep dive question that self-reflection is necessary. For me, there were things that when we had kids, I had to go back and realize, oh, that was a vow and a judgment that I made that I shouldn't have, because I swore I would never, but that's not real. That's, if I try to do that thing or be that thing, I'm going to become the thing I swore I never would. Are y'all following me on this? And so this will take longer than we have for tonight, but I highly encourage you all to sit down with those questions on your prompt and go through that this week. And I'll say this, it's never too late to evaluate those things. Never, ever, ever, whether you have a 2-year-old or a 15-year-old, it's never too late to evaluate, are there things that I've held on to that I shouldn't have in what I thought is an ought or an ought not in life. It teaches flexibility and evaluation, right? To yourself, blessed are the flexible, they will not be bent out of shape, right? And it teaches that like we talked about in week 1, that culture of assessment to where am I, right? What am I doing? How am I? And realistically, if you talk to almost any parent, they'll have a list of things that they swore they'd never do, they'd wind up doing, right? We swore up and down, we will never have screen time for our kids. Like, well, guess what? Now we still have boundaries on it, right? But guess what?
But are there days where it's just like,
yes, you may play
today
Sonic
is
the
the
Hedgehog.
day. It's
Sure.
raining outside. and we're all in pajamas.
And there's 18 loads of laundry to do. So guess
Guess
what? While we
what?
do that, you can play on your iPad.
Whatever
yes.
you want to do.
Yeah.
Have a great time. Would you like candy? There you go.
It's
a party
I think
day.
of a story about your mom giving you all ding dongs for dinner.
Yeah, there was one night. Okay, understand, my mom was phenomenal. Like, I never had macaroni and cheese from a box until I went to college because it was all homemade. Like, I didn't understand. I didn't fathom that idea. Like, I didn't understand. So she, homemade all the things, and we didn't have a lot of money at this point in our lives, and so she really was homemaking everything from scratch. And there was one day where I guess she was just overwhelmed. Now, I didn't realize that Mom was overwhelmed at this point in my life. I was like 5, and I'm just living my best life. And I'm like, Mom, can we have ding-dongs for dinner? And she goes, yeah, have ding-dongs for dinner. So my dad comes in, and my brother and I are eating ding-dongs for dinner, and he's like,
Oh, my.
oh God, right? Now I hear that story, and I hear it completely differently than I did when I was 5 and 10, right?
There'll be days where she'll look at us and she'll go, it's a ding dongs for dinner kind of day. And we're like,
She's
yeah.
like, I did that once, and now that's all you guys talk about. Like, the one day that I had, So.
But it's okay. There are times that you'll look back and go, well, I swore I'd never do that, but guess what I get to do now? I get to do that thing.
Yep.
And again, refer back to week 1, the core values and priorities, right? Share the why when you evaluate and when things change, and it's going to change the way life happens with your kids. It's okay to share the why things are changing with them. In fact, it's so important to share, hey, you know what? This thing is changing. We're doing this differently now. And here's why.
Yeah.
That'll teach
we have
them.
meetings.
Yeah, that'll teach. We talked about meetings week 1. Oh. We talk about hey, you know what? Bedtime is changing, and here's why, right? Mm-hmm. Or how we're doing chores is changing, and here's why. To teach them how to make those decisions with health. And there are some times where it's like, they ask you why. I'll tell you when you're older. There's a great old story from Corrie ten Boom. Anyone who Corrie ten Boom is? From the World War II, her family hid Jews in Holland, and they were caught, and they were sent to concentration camps, and great, look it up, great story. But her dad was a clockmaker. And he had this massive tool chest, like probably weighed 100 pounds, if I had to guess.
Sure.
And there were times, I guess there was a story where something about sex had come up in her school. And she went and asked her dad, what is this and this and this? And he said, okay, you know what? When you can carry my...
No, he said, go pick that up.
Yeah, go pick it up. I have to go to the bus, carry this with me to the bus. And she couldn't, it was too heavy. I can't carry this. Well, so is the thing you're asking me about. This is too heavy for you to know, right? And so there are times
it would be wrong of me to expect you to carry that to the train station.
Right.
It's also wrong of me to expect you to carry that information right now.
Right. And so there are times where our
me?
kids are like, well, that's a clockmaker box, And they're like, oh, is that a toolbox question? Yeah, that's a toolbox question.
Deal.
And that's okay to let them know the boundaries of like, hey, that's not appropriate for you. Well, how come you told so-and-so? Well, my sister. Well, she's older than you are.
Yep.
That's okay. Yeah. So I want to shift gears, last gear shift for the night, talking about discipling. And it's very much in line with what we're talking about, that every family is going to look different. We said this a lot in week 1, but don't let perfect become the enemy of good, right? Don't hold yourself to unreachable standards.
I think we did that for a long time.
Oh gosh, we did for a long time.
Right, because you get all these like family devotional books, and it's like day 1, day 2, day 3. Look, I don't see all my people in the same room some days for like 4 days at a time. Like right. This stresses me out when it's labeled by days because
Yep.
I'm not going to do it. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to feel bad, and then I'm going to be shamed, and then it's going to be a whole thing. And so This is terrible.
And while it's okay to take ideas from other people, like even from us, right? The people we have come in, like, yeah, sure, take ideas. Go for it. Don't hold yourself up in comparison to another family, another parent, etc. That only is going to set you up for shame, for guilt, and resentment. Resenting yourself, resenting your life situation, resenting your spouse, like resenting your kids even. Don't compare. It's just that doesn't work. Instead, use the tools you have available. There are so many tools. Some people like to make it up as they go, and that's okay. As long as you're actually making it up as you go and going along with it and not just forgetting about it, sure. Some people like Devo books. Some people like guides. Some people like, apps. But find your thing. Mm-hmm. There's not really a right or wrong answer as to which tools are best. It's more about which tools are best for you and which tools are best for your kids. What's in your hands to use right now, right? I do not spit on technology as a great discipleship tool. I think technology is a great discipleship tool if you use it right. Things like the YouVersion Bible app. It's a great little Bible story teaching game.
But if
It's
the
great.
only time that they ever hear the word Jesus and what would Jesus do is off of a Bible app,
Womp womp.
that's a problem.
Yeah, find a great, and again, that cc.guy or cc.family website, we're posting resources for you guys to have. Like, hey,
There's one that we're posting on there, these Bible alphabet cards. And I remember we did those for a while. And actually, I was like, you remember there was the guy, he used to come teach at this one church that we were at. And like, he would always talk about this. And like, we literally had to do the like roundabout
Where
Google
was
thing
that?
to find him. And I was like, yes, buy those because we need a new set of those. Because now we took the girls through them. And now I'm looking at the boys like, oh, we haven't done these with you. And these were so great. And basically, it's like, each card has like a letter. I don't
alphabet.
remember what A is, but A. I do remember A because it's ant, and there's pictures of ants.
go to the ant, you sluggard.
Consider its ways and be wise, wherever that is, because I'm really bad at references. And then on the back, there's like questions, and they kind of go deeper by age. So I think it's going to be something that's going to be fun now that we have all four of them in like all these different spaces. To start with, okay, Samuel, what do you think, and work our way up. And it doesn't say do this on day 1 and do this on day 2 and do this on day 3. So what we used to do is we would just be like, okay, this is what we're doing for now. And until we all can memorize this, this is what we're doing until we all get it down. And then when we all get it down, we'll switch it when we have time.
But
Cool.
the girls were like, go to the ant, you
Yeah, they were
sluggard,
just like,
you know,
can we please move on to the next one? Okay, fine. You know what I mean? And then we would, I don't know that we even got all the way through C. I'm not going to lie. But like, that's something that even the girls still remember. Probably A through like C, but they still remember that because then he would like get on the piano and make up little jingles sometimes. But so just do the things that work.
Yeah.
Like find things that are like, hey, we can do that because it doesn't tell me I have to do it every day.
And look for ways to weave concepts of Christ and biblical truth into your normal conversations.
Yep.
Right? Look, I mean, it's not rocket science. It's, well, what do you think God would say about that? What do you think Jesus would say about what that person did? Or, does that make sense?
And you have to be careful you're not teaching them to judge.
Right.
But like, okay, then what if we're in a situation, what do we do?
Right.
How do we show Christ?
Because discipling is not about creating Bible memorization robots. I have friends who went to high school and college, or grew up with a church, who could read you the entirety of Psalm 139, but they got up, grew up, moved off, and want zero to do with Christ now. Their amount of Bible memorization didn't matter, right? It's not about creating robots. It's about creating kids who can. I'll read what I wrote down here. It's about introducing them to a lifestyle where Jesus is woven into the fabric of your life, right? Where it's just part of what you do. It's part of who you are. As you think about what Jesus would say, you think about what the Bible says. You think about what the right thing is. You let the Holy Spirit speak to you. You just weave it in, right? Anybody seen? There's a great little Schitt's Creek TV show reference, like just fold it in, fold the cheese in. Well, you just fold it in, right?
Fold it in.
The
fold
truth
it
is,
in.
you're going to just do it as is natural for you, right?
There's a
don't
scripture in
don't
Deuteronomy.
become like some like Bible person all of a sudden. When just be you, just fold it in,
Yeah,
right?
Just kind of be intentional. There's the scripture in Deuteronomy that's like, keep it before your face when you're on the road and when you're at home and all those sorts of things. And it's just, and I think that was one of the nice things when you have like either a verse or something that you're just like, this is what we're doing for now. You'll find plenty of ways to work in, go to the ant, you sluggard, when you have kids, right? And then like the second one was like about being kind, like a honeybee and honey or something like that. And so you can always find ways to work that in, right? Like, so anything that you can do that's just like, okay, this is what we're going to do for now, and then just work it in.
Yeah.
Fold it in.
And again, appropriate vulnerability is important. Your kids put you on a pedestal, and a lot of times they're not going to grasp the idea that you struggle with anything unless you share it with them. They're not going to see your struggle unless you share it with them. And so be appropriate, but share it with them.
Don't
right?
burden them with it.
Right.
Don't ask them for advice if they're 4. Don't be a weirdo. But it's okay to say, I'm just sad tonight. So I think tonight I'm just you want to snuggle with me? We're going to read a book.
You said this when we were writing this the other day. If you only share or reveal the high points of yourself to your kids, they will automatically associate low points in life with shame because it's not you. Does that make sense? If you only show them the good parts of yourself, you only show them the wins, then they're going to automatically associate losses with disappointing you and with being shamed. So
And
don't
not quite good enough.
Right. So, like, it's okay to say, I don't know. If they ask you a question, they're going to ask you questions, especially about this stuff.
If they ask
I don't
you
know
a
is okay.
question.
Yeah. I don't know is okay as long as you work with them to figure it out together. Discipling your kids is all about finding moments to point them back to Christ. And so on that, I want to bring in a couple of things that if you haven't read the 50-50, the toilet read that we talked about in week 1, I'm just going to give you some of the high points from, it's a beautiful discipleship model. And a lot of what we've talked about over the past couple of weeks, you'll find in that. There are 3 principles that are key to creating a discipleship environment in your home. Abundant grace, authentic relationships, and active faith. And so what does that look like? Grace is unearned favor, right? Lead with grace. When you correct, when you discipline, lead with grace.
Okay, so for example, when you had the whole thing happen this morning, and then we talked about it, and then, because it was, what are we going to do? Because this keeps happening and all the things. And then it was...
One of the things was she forgot her lunch at home.
That was part of the issue.
She didn't make a lunch, and then she lied about not making lunch.
Right. There was a lot going on this morning.
Yeah.
So that was part of it. And so he said, I think I'm going to go pick her up a Chick-fil-A wrap because she really likes those. And I think I'm going to go take it to her at school to let her know that I'm still in her corner. And that's a part of it. There's still consequences. But, like, I'm still going to show you, and if there's a list of consequences that we're going to have to work through, where can I show you grace and show up for you and show you that I love you and that there is grace and there's mercy?
Yeah. View mistakes as teaching moments, right? If you, and this is a hard thing, this is not a guy thing or a girl thing, it's just a human thing. If your reaction is anger, just naturally when things go wrong, learn to take a step back. Learn to step back before you lead with anger. Don't lead with anger, lead with grace. How you react to mistakes in the moment matters. I had to go back and correct myself to my daughters this morning because I led with anger when they did what they did this morning, right? I had to go back and say, yeah, I shouldn't have yelled at you. I shouldn't have thrown your lunchbox. I did both those things this morning.
Oh,
it was great.
Good.
Not at them, just across the room.
You were just going to go ahead and say it because I was going to hear it later anyway.
Yeah, I shouldn't have led with it.
Yeah, just like
shouldn't have led with anger.
Yeah.
And
it's okay to be angry, and we let them know, like, it's still okay. Like, there are times that it's like, I'm angry right now.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I'm not going to try to, like, put some face on and let my kids not know that I'm angry, but also self-control, not throwing the lunchbox or...
This is a big one here, too. Let your children know that you value honesty over perfection, right? Be careful not to condemn or shame, like we talked about earlier. Don't shame them when they're open with you about a mistake. Continually reinforce unconditional love. Make sure they know the why behind your boundaries. We talked about this, too. Let them know that there's nothing that they can do to make you love them less or more, right? That's what abundant grace looks like. Authentic relationships. There's good news and bad news. I'm just going to hit these real fast. Good news and bad news about authentic relationships. They will adopt the beliefs and values of you, right? That's good. That's the good news. Bad news is the authentic relationships don't happen naturally. They don't just happen. You have to be intentional with authentic relationships. And we talked about that a lot last week about your village and their circles and all the things, right? And then active faith. Teach your kids not only to pray, but to act when they see a need. That's so huge. Not just pray. Yes, teach them to pray when there's something wrong, right? We try. We don't always succeed. This morning, I thank God I remembered this in our moment in the car. Before I sent her to school, we prayed. Whew, like we needed to pray. And I want to be like, get out of my car. But thankfully, the Holy Spirit was like, Michael, right? And we prayed. Teach them not just to pray when there's a problem, but to meet a need when they see a need, right? To be Jesus. When you respond to needs, let your kids be part of it. I love that. And not like, look at this amazing thing I'm doing. I'm buying someone. Like, no, right? But you explain, hey, this person needs something, and we have the ability to help them with that thing. Mm-hmm. When we do our giving, we let our kids know, here's what we're doing, right? Even
we
with
don't
finances.
Give them numbers.
No, but like, hey, we know that so-and-so needs this thing, and we can do that for them, and so we're going to do that. We don't tell people about this. We don't flaunt it. Mm-hmm. We're not making a big deal, but we know that the Lord has put this in our hands to help them with, and so we're going to.
And there have been different times that we've sat down and said, okay, like if y'all were to pick an organization that we were going to give a certain amount to,
right? What
do you want to do?
Or to do something for.
Yeah.
It's not just about giving money either. and living out your faith by serving together at church, participating in things of faith together, right? That's why I love that we do our best to involve, do things that are kids focused or families focused with Love Tulsa. Like that's an easy button for us at City Church. Take your kids with you when you go do something, right? Mm-hmm. If it's missions trips, if it's going to a nursing home and taking Christmas cards for a nursing home, if it's
or if it's your friend just had a baby in the hospital and you're going to go take them coffee. Oh, where's mom? Oh, so and so had a right. Telling them what you're doing, right. That's showing Jesus to other people, so that they see that as something that's normal. Yeah. That's just what you do for friends. That's just what you do for people.
Yeah. So if you haven't read that little paper, the booklet, it's on our website. Highly recommend you do it. It's great. It goes deeper into those things. But yeah, so we have just a few more minutes here for if you have any light Q&As. If you have heavy questions, please write them down. Next week, again, we're doing a panel.
Card.
And so please bring us questions tonight or next week. We want to be able to go deep into things with you guys. And I'm excited about more perspectives. But before we wrap up, are there any questions tonight or things you want us to hit on tonight before we wrap up? We've covered a lot of ground.
Really easy stuff. Real light.
Yeah, here's all the answers, not really.
Maybe not about this, but I do have a question.
Shoot.
Javen mentioned to me last week that he been thinking about getting baptized.
Cool.
Do we do baptisms?
Actually,
absolutely.
Yes,
November 24th. Not this Sunday, but next Sunday.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. If you go to cc.guide, it'll be a sign up right there.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want him to sit down with one of us and talk through it, we welcome to. Otherwise, if he's ready to go and he knows what he's doing and knows what it's about, sign him up.
Yeah. Well, he mentioned that, and I was like, but he's the one that told me that we didn't do baptisms up here, and I was like,
yeah, we do.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, we do.
Jay.
Yeah, cc.guide. You can just sign up on the 24th.
okay.
That's
Maybe,
awesome.
Maybe if you could just mention it to him and see what he says to you.
I'll grab him.
Yeah.
If you don't see him, I'll grab him. One of us
Yeah,
will grab
I see
him.
You bet. Anybody else? Anything you want to touch on tonight? You have questions to bring me? Good. Next
Michael just wants
again, we'll
paper
have
questions.
3 or 4 other families here who will just do a panel Q&A time.
I'm really excited about next week because
Yeah.
I like talking about how other people do things, because usually I go home with like, oh, we can do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there are some things that people are like, we have dinner together every night. And I'm like, no.
That would be nice. But
No.
Yeah.
You know, it's okay. Take what you can, leave the rest.
Before we wrap up content, I think if I could leave you with one thing, intentional is not a formula. Intentional is just being true to who you are and doing it, right? So don't hold yourself in comparison to anybody else's parents. Don't.
You can't.
You can't.
No one's life is going to look exactly the same.
We all wish that we could. We all wish that there was somebody else out there who got us completely and totally. Like, I wish there was another family who understood, a medical career and a ministry career and 4 kids. And no, there's no one.
doing it all at the same
There's very few people, right? I wish, I will never understand. Yeah. It's
Anything than what we've done.
Yep.
Right? So again, that's where it's like you have the conversations with other people and then you work out what works for you.
Yeah. So, thanks for coming. See you next week.
Good night.
Bring me your questions.